Hi, I'm Chris McClellan, and I'm here with my colleague Steph Rafai. We're senior product managers working on Docker Desktop, and we're here to run you through what's new in Docker Desktop over the course of the last year. So, without further ado, let's have a quick look at the topics for today. It's been an awesome year, and we're super excited to announce all of the great work the team has been doing to enhance and expand the Docker Desktop dev experience. Firstly, we're delighted to say that Docker Desktop for Linux is now generally available. And as we mentioned in the keynote, we'll run you through a quick demo of Desktop for Linux here. Steph will then cover Compose v2, which we made generally available at the end of April. And then we'll go on to cover how we've been making substantial improvements to file sharing performance on macOS with Apple's virtualization framework and using virtiofs. If you use volumes or bind mounts for sharing code between your host machine and containers, then this could be of particular interest to you. We'll briefly touch on Pause Resume, a new feature that allows you to freeze all running Docker processes on your machine while taking a break from your development work. Then we'll move on to our new volume management tab before running you through some exciting changes we've made to both dev environments and the Docker Dashboard homepage. Steph will run you through the work we've done on authorization flows, including launching SSO to make it easier to sign into Docker Desktop with your chosen identity provider, and also introducing scoped access tokens. We'll then provide a quick overview of how we've made the update process friendlier before rounding up with the work done on build improvements and introducing support for SBOMs. Also, please don't forget to check out Amy's section of the DockerCon keynote for an overview of all of the awesome work that's been done on Docker extensions. So let's get started with Desktop for Linux. As of May 5th, Desktop for Linux became generally available. Desktop for Linux ensures that Linux developers are able to leverage all of the exciting new functionality that's being built into Docker Desktop, such as the extensions that we've seen earlier today at DockerCon. We want to stress that nothing will change for users of Docker Engine. Desktop for Linux is purely additive. We built Desktop for Linux in response to community demand, as it was the second highest upvoted issue on our public roadmap. When we spoke to Linux developers, it was clear that they wanted a unified Docker experience across all major OSs, immediate access to new features that have up until now only been available on macOS and Windows, the Docker Desktop UI that makes it so much easier to manage volumes, containers, and images, as well as providing you with insights into the Docker processes running locally on your machine, and of course, the seamless Kubernetes integration that Desktop provides, which makes it so much easier to get your local Kubernetes development environment up and running. We'd like to thank our Linux developer community for all of their feedback throughout the process of building Desktop for Linux and for all of the time they've spent testing out new iterations of the product. We truly couldn't do it without you, and we're looking forward to continuing to add to the desktop experience on Linux and maintaining parity with the Docker experience on Windows and Mac OS. So let's have a quick look at a demo of Desktop for Linux. This is one that I pre-recorded. So here I'm using Ubuntu 21.10 on my Lenovo laptop. And if you do a quick search for Desktop for Linux, you'll find the relevant documentation super easily. This has since changed since we made Desktop for Linux generally available. During beta, we were only supporting deb packages, or only providing a deb package. So it might look a little bit different for you, but it's still super easy to install. I already had it installed on my machine though, so here I just chose to start it up. It doesn't take too long. Once it gets started, I'll have a quick look around images, volumes, tabs. I go back to the container tab at the top left there. So I can start this Nginx container super easily, one click. And once it's running, I can go in to inspect the container's logs, some interesting metadata, and some stats. On the images tab, I could pull the latest version of that Nginx image, should I wish. You can see I've already actually got the latest one installed there though, so I won't do that. And the volumes management tab is something that Steph will go into in more detail later. Suffice to say that I can create and delete volumes super easily there now. Dev environments is a super interesting new feature that we've got here. It essentially allows you to share work in progress code with your teammates. I go to GitHub here and I find the URL for a project a custom React boilerplate that I used to use a lot for development work. And all I have to do is copy and paste that URL in here. And you'll see that Desktop then pulls all of the tools that are required for me to run that project. And it does it in a way that causes zero friction with my local tooling setup on my host machine, which is super interesting. So while that runs, I went to the extensions tab just to show you all the cool stuff that we've got there. So I installed the Tailscale extension and also the extension for disk usage. They install super quickly. And I go into the disk usage extension here, and you can see that it tells me I've got 156 megabytes of reclaimable space. I think I could get most of that back using removing stopped containers and unused images. I don't do that here though. I instead go into Tailscale and have a look at the documentation for that. Again, super easy to set up. I just don't do it here because of time constraints for this demo. And going back to dev environments, you can see that everything is running now. And I've got this open in VS Code button. If I click on that button, you'll see that this modal window opens, and it allows me to basically install Visual Studio Code there as well as some relevant extensions. And basically, I can then run the application server for that inside a container using the Visual Studio Code terminal and access it automatically from the host. So you can see that that's a super easy way for me to containerize my app and share it with teammates. So yeah, that's Desktop for Linux in a nutshell. At launch, we're providing a deb and RPM package format, which covers a decent range of popular Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, as well as Fedora. We're also supporting Arch Linux, and we're excited to announce that we'll soon be supporting 64-bit variants of Raspberry Pi OS. If you'd like to report any issues, please do so on the Desktop Linux issue tracker within Docker's GitHub space. And to get started with Docker Desktop for Linux, visit the Docker docs and just find the relevant instructions for your distro of choice. So now I'll hand over to Steph to run you through Compose v2.
Awesome, thanks Chris. So we're thrilled to announce the general availability of Docker Compose version 2. We launched the first version of v2 in June of 2021. And thanks to everyone's amazing feedback, we've made a lot of improvements since the initial rollout. And we've seen a lot of adoption over the last 10 months. And we're hearing all kinds of good things about v2, which we're really excited about. The transition to Go was one of our most roadmap items, and it has enabled us to deliver more features at a faster rate while maintaining all of the great things folks love from v1. So these are all now integrated into the Docker CLI, and we've created a seamless user experience across Docker tools by making this transition. And really the best thing about v2 is that for most people, this doesn't change anything. So Docker Desktop versions 3.4 and above have Compose v2 installed, and you can enable aliasing of Docker -compose to Docker space compose by default. So you can just use v2 as a drop-in replacement for v1, and while requiring minimal, if any, updates to your scripts. So that's really exciting. And we just need your help on two things. So first off, we have put out in our blog and in this roadmap item a proposal for the end of life of Docker Compose v1, which includes 6 months of critical security and bug fixes and a 1-year grace period of opting out of v2. We have no plans of removing the ability to alias, but we'd like to get your feedback on this plan so we can adjust and monitor the community's feedback along the way. And more importantly, we need your help naming our friend here, the octopus. So you can head over to that top GitHub issue to submit your names and vote on your favorites. And we look forward to what we come up with as a community. And next up, we'll cover performance and resource management enhancements that have been made on Docker Desktop. I'll hand it back to my colleague, Chris, to start us off.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, so let's have a look at the recent improvements that have been made to the performance of file sharing on macOS. So, a common developer workflow when using technologies like Symfony or React is to edit source code located on the macOS host while running the app itself in a Docker container. The source code is shared between the host and the container by using Docker volumes, with a command like the one at the top of this page, the docker run v command that you can see there. This allows the developer to edit their source code, save the changes, and immediately see the results in their browser. Changes made to files located on the host system must propagate quickly and reliably to the container file system for the developer to optimize productivity and have a good experience. This is why file sharing performance across the host and VM boundary is so critical. When you consider that modern dependency management can easily bring 10,000 to 100,000 files into a project, which linearly increases the performance penalty, this can result in poor performance as the host and container keep in sync via that volume. So with some recent changes that we've made to file sharing on Docker Desktop for Mac, including the inclusion of an experimental new technology called VirtIOFS, we're alleviating this problem and bringing drastic improvements to file system performance. Specifically, we've received some great feedback from early users who have measured performance against their own benchmarks. As you can see on the right, one user reported a 90% improvement in the time taken to complete a fairly large MySQL import, and another reported an 87% improvement in the time taken to run Composer install for a large code base. There's also some really nice quotes underneath there. Enabling VirtIOFS is incredibly easy. You literally just have to select a couple of toggles within the Experimental Features tab of Docker Desktop. However, you must ensure that you're using Docker Desktop 4.6 or later, and a version of macOS greater than or equal to 12.3. Our hope is to make VirtIOFS the default file sharing mechanism on Docker Desktop for Mac in the very near future, and we'll continue to work towards that goal. I also really want to thank our macOS community here. Our macOS community are amazing. You've been jumping on new builds that we send out via the GitHub issue and are always super quick to provide us with feedback, which is so useful in helping us to keep momentum up on this. Some of you have even been diving in and helping us identify the root causes of some performance issues, which has been immensely helpful. Performance on macOS is a top priority for us. And as I say, we're hoping to make VirtIOFS the default file sharing mechanism on Mac very soon, once we work through a couple of the remaining stability issues there. Continuing on the theme of performance of Docker Desktop, in November we introduced Pause Resume. So Pause Resume allows developers to pause their current Docker Desktop session and save resources on their machine. When you pause Desktop, the current state of your containers are saved in memory and all processes are frozen. To resume, you can just click the resume button in the dashboard or the whale menu, or type in any Docker command via the terminal. And now, Steph is going to run you through volume management, another feature that can help you manage your local resources when using Docker Desktop.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so we know that working with volumes are super handy. It makes it easy to persist data when using stateful applications, allows you to make sure that the data still exists even if you delete the container. But when it comes to having visibility into your volumes and easily cleaning them up, it can be a bit tricky and time consuming and lead to wasted disk space. So volume management kind of gives you an easy way to manage and explore your volumes so you can identify which volumes are being used, what containers they're being used by, and what data is in the volume. So we'll take a quick tour of this. Awesome. So while looking at the disk usage extension, you can see that 1/3 of my volume space can be reclaimed by unused ones by deleting them out. So I want to just make sure I don't need any of them before I remove them. So hopping over to the volumes tab, I can sort by status to see all the ones I would delete. I'm not sure what this one is, so clicking into it, you get more details before you remove it forever. So I can see that there's no containers using it, and I can check what data is there. The data, I realize is something that I want, so I'm downloading it and saving it locally. And now that I've backed up my data, I can confidently delete it. Jumping back to the volumes page, I actually want to delete everything that's more than a month old. So I sort by created, and there's one volume that's over a month old and being used, so I want to quickly check that out. can click on the container it's being used by, and it stopped. So I feel like I could confidently delete that one and get back to finishing my cleanup. So just using multi-select here to delete the ones that I don't need anymore. And I'm good to go, freeing up a bunch of space confidently. And finally, it can create a new volume here right from the dashboard. Take a look next at the ways that we've been investing in the onboarding experiences with Docker desktop features. We'll start with Docker development environments. So last DockerCon, we announced Docker Dev Environments, which essentially allows you to use a Docker container as a fully featured development environment. And you can even attach VS Code and develop right inside of the container. So it solves the pain of starting a new job and spending days to set up your machine and making sure you install everything like terminals, debugging tools, compilers, so on. And it just lets you instead define a development environment with all of the tooling that you need to develop and run the app. So you can ensure that the local environment is the same for every developer in your organization and keep the environment details versioned along the way with your code. And so since last year, we've made it even easier to get started using a preset up dev environment. So let's just take a look. All you really need is creating an environment, get started, you can paste the GitHub link, and that's it. It's as easy as that. Now we'll take a quick look at the new Docker Dashboard homepage. So when starting with Docker Desktop, it can be kind of hard to know where to start. So as a first step to reducing the learning curve, we've introduced a new homepage to Docker Desktop that helps you get started running your first app really quickly. So with one click, you can run some of the most popular Docker official images. You also have easy access to things like documentation and release notes. So this is just step one. So we can start to collect feedback from the community on what people would like to see on this homepage. And we plan to add more Docker official images and the ability to search for images soon, so you never have to leave the app to find an image. And you can let us know what else you'd like to see on the new homepage by heading over to our public roadmap and submitting ideas or giving feedback right from the link in the dashboard. So we're super excited about this first step and your feedback. Docker Desktop. So with first step being authorization enhancements. So we'll take a look at easy authentication. So with Docker Desktop 4.4, we introduced a new authentication flow, which is awesome if you're anything like me, because I never remember my passwords and I'm constantly resetting them. So this flow made my life a lot easier. So we'll check it out. You can see when you sign in, you get taken through the browser now. So you get the benefits of autofill from whatever browser you're using of your password. You might have noticed that I got taken through our single sign-on provider. So as part of this, we've also introduced single sign-on for users with a business subscription, which allows organizations to have easy and secure onboarding of developers to the Docker platform. Moving into scoped access tokens. So we also introduced scoped access tokens, which allows you to have finer grained control over the kind of access that your machine has when logged in to your repos and content. So this is really great for things like setting up service accounts and CI systems or registry mirrors, or even on your local machine to make sure you're not giving away too much access. So there are 4 types: read, write, delete, which is all of the repos that you have, and you're able to have access to it. It does not allow you to modify account settings as a password authentication would, but that's the most access. And then there's read, write. This scope is for read, write within repos you have access to. That's all the public content on Hub and your private content. This is the sort of scope to use within a CI that is also pushing to a repo. Then there's read only. This scope is read only for all repos you have access to, which is great when used in production where it only needs to pull content from your repos to run it. And then public repo read only. The scope is reading only public content, so nothing from your team's repos would be able to be read from it. This is the most restrictive. So this is great if you want to set up a system which is just pulling Docker official images or verified content from Docker Hub or something like that. So we'll take a little look at how you can set this up. So you do it in Docker Hub. In your security settings, you can create a new access token. You can name it, and then you get the option to set the scope right there. Then once you've created one, you can also remove it pretty easily. So easy as that with Docker Desktop. So first, thanks to everyone who gave us feedback about how we can improve the update workflow. It's why we've done away with the update pop-up and introduced a new update settings section in the Docker Dashboard where you can check for updates, see what's new, and manage your update preferences. We love and appreciate when users stay up to date because it helps us deliver developers the best quality experience with the latest security patches, bug fixes, and features. But we also want to make sure that we enable developers to do that at a time that's convenient. So starting with Docker Desktop 4.2, we have enabled all users, regardless of subscription tier, to turn off automatically checking for updates. When you disable this setting, all notifications in the whale menu and the app will be disabled, and you will have to manually check for updates. We also know that people have different preferences when it comes to downloading updates, so we made it possible for you to decide when you want it to happen. So we also would love to know what other options you want for your updates. So let us know on roadmap issue number 259. And moving on to software bill of materials. So included in Docker Desktop 4.7 is a new experimental Docker CLI command, Docker SBOM, also known as software bill of materials. So you can view the SBOM of any Docker image. So this was developed in an open source collaboration with Anchor using their SIFT project. So a software bill of material is kind of analogous to a packing list for shipment. So it's all the components that make up the software or were used to build it. For container images, this includes operating system packages that are installed and language-specific packages that the software depends on. SBOMs make a container image more transparent, so you can easily see what's inside of them. And the best time to determine and record what is in a container image is when you're putting the image together with Docker Build. So to enable this, we're working on making it easy for partners in the community to add SBOM functionality to Docker Build using Buildkit's extensibility. So let's check it out really quick. Running on Neo4j Docker SBOM, you see it's loading the image. Parsing, cataloging, and there you go. Everything inside of the image, as easy as that. And just a quick note on Buildkit and Buildx. So desktop builds use Buildkit by default now, and this really enables faster builds, better caching, access to new Docker file features, and access to Buildx. And we plan on making Buildx the default backend with the next Docker Engine release, which gives you all the access to Buildkit features, simple multi-platform builds, building inside Docker containers or Kubernetes clusters, and builder namespacing. And really you can check out and learn about everything new in Docker Build in Kevin and Tonus's session on the Black Belt tribe. So I recommend you check that out. And last but not least, a quick note on system proxies. So for folks who are maybe working in a corporate environment, we've made it really easy to configure that in Docker Desktop. Really, you don't have to do anything anymore. So if you're using a proxy, There's no manual configuration necessary. Docker Desktop will just read the proxy settings and propagate them out to Docker. So it makes it really simple to use Docker in any environment. And on that, thank you. We wanted to make sure to thank everybody who has been so supportive and given so much feedback and spent time testing preview builds and contributing to our roadmap, because it really helps us make all of these enhancements and features possible. We know how important it is to get feedback directly from the people who use it the most, and we really, really appreciate it. Like, many of these features come straight from the roadmap, as you can see here with Desktop for Linux and update management and file system sharing performance. And it's been just tremendously helpful to get input from folks, and we really appreciate it. And we encourage you to continue to contribute to the Docker roadmap. The link is there. You can add new feature ideas yourself. You can upvote ones that other people have put in, and we pay close attention to that, so that we can deliver things that the community is looking for. We also have a preview program which you can sign up to at this link, where we send preview builds with features that are maybe not out yet, to get early feedback from folks. So if you're interested, you can check that out. But that's it for me today. So thanks so much for your time, and have a great rest of DockerCon.